Hi guys, I'm Nina. Welcome back to my channel. I do videos on motherhood and lifestyle content. I am currently 35 weeks pregnant and I am starting to really prepare for the labor and delivery of our baby number 2, baby girl that we are expecting at the end of October. For my first birth, I feel like I had zero idea of what to expect, and I had a birth plan, but I really had no idea what I was doing or how to prepare for birth, whereas this time around there are certain things that I'm doing differently with baby number 2, so I'm going to share those with you guys today. I'm also going to share a few things that we did with our first baby that we actually really liked and are going to be doing again with our second baby as well. I've been kind of keeping a running list in my head and just been thinking about different things that I really liked about our first birth experience, and then things that I didn't like so much and I just really want to make sure that I do differently this time around. So I've kind of had that in my head ever since getting pregnant with this baby, but I went ahead and just made a list and put it all together so I can have a little bit of a game plan. So there are things that I'm doing before birth, during birth, and after birth differently. So I'll go ahead and start with things that I'm doing differently before birth this time around. Okay, so the first thing that I'm doing differently is how I'm preparing for labor. So with baby number 1, I felt like I did not do much preparation. I watched maybe a few YouTube videos before giving birth, but in my head I kept telling myself I'm just gonna get the epidural, I'm not gonna feel anything, and it's gonna be easy peasy, good to go, which was not the case. I ended up having a natural birth and I was not at all mentally or even physically prepared for that. I didn't have any tricks up my sleeve or any, techniques of how to handle contractions, especially as things got more intense. Whereas this time around, I really hope to have a natural birth. I do not want to rely on the epidural. If I end up getting one, I'm okay with that, but I would like to try and have another natural birth, but to be more prepared for that natural birth this time around. So I've been educating myself with different coping techniques and how to deal with the contractions. One thing that I'm doing differently is really trying to have the mindset of surrendering to each contraction. I've been doing a lot of research on Christian hypnobirthing, which is really just a mental preparation for birth, because so much of birth is mental. So much of our pain tolerance and the things that we can handle and can't handle is actually mental versus physical, because we are made to give birth. It is a natural thing and a beautiful process, but the mental battle can be tough and really intense. So mentally preparing to have those waves of contractions, and hopefully this time around having a different mentality of, instead of fighting the contractions, surrendering to each contraction and using different breathing techniques and coping techniques squeezing a hairbrush I'll try, or just different relaxing techniques like going in the shower, having the heating pad. But I'm just really trying to prepare for the actual labor process this time around, whereas last time I did pretty much no preparation. And even if you are planning on getting an epidural, I still think that it's important to prepare for the process, because at some point you're probably going to be feeling some contraction. I think it makes such a difference just to have that mental preparation, and there's so much education out there when it comes to birth. I'll link my favorites down below so you guys can just see some sites that have been really helpful for me in preparing for this labor process. The second thing that I really want to do differently this time around is have different labor positions. I delivered Jaden on my back. I think that position did not help with the tearing. There's a lot of research that says that it's better to give birth on all fours or in different positions, even a squatting position. And I've talked to my doctor about it. She's all for it. So I've been looking at different positions for birth. At the end of the day, I'm going to do whatever feels comfortable and natural for me. If that's on my back, then that's where I'll be, but my goal is to give birth in a different position. I've also been prepping my husband for that, because I feel like in the moment of giving birth, the support around you needs to be on the same page as you. So having my husband on the same page of knowing that I might need assistance with getting into different positions or figuring out what's comfortable, and having him be able to advocate for me with the nurses and the staff there is going to hopefully make a big difference. Another thing that I'm hoping to do differently this time around is I really am going to try not to get induced. With Jaden, I think I was just so ready to meet him and so excited to meet him that as soon as I hit 40 weeks, I was okay with getting induced, and I got induced at 40 weeks and 1 day. This time around, I would like to wait a little bit longer before getting induced. I would probably not want to go past 41 or 2 weeks. That's just my personal preference. I know people do it all the time. I would like to wait at least a little bit longer to give my body a chance to go into birth naturally if baby doesn't come before then. When I was induced, they gave me, I believe it was called Cytotec. I didn't even get to the Pitocin, so my body did react really well to being induced. I started having contractions on my own right away. But I know that they say that the contractions are a lot more painful when you are induced. So I would rather have natural contractions, especially if I'm trying to make it through birth without having very much interventions. I would rather have the least painful contractions as possible. One thing that I am doing differently this time around is praying for the nurses and the hospital staff that I'm going to be interacting with. If you saw my video about my first birth, I'll put that down below if you haven't seen it, but I struggled with the staff that I was working with, and I know that the nurses make such a big difference when it comes to birth. Are the ones that are there for most of the process, and then the doctor really just comes in at the end. So this time around, I'm really praying for just God sent staff in the hospital and praying for the people that I'm going to be interacting with just to be supportive and uplifting throughout the whole labor process. I want to make little nurses baskets for the different sets of nurses that we're going to be dealing with, just to kind of start that off on the right foot when they come in, to give them a little gift and let them know that they're loved and appreciated and have that positive interaction with them this time around. The next thing that I'm doing differently is I want to have less cervical checks this time around. I didn't really even realize last time that they were optional, that they're not necessarily required to get cervical checks, that I do have a say in anything that they're doing to my body. So I would like to get cervical checks, like maybe right when I get at the hospital, and then maybe towards the end if I just feel like I need to. I'm not really sure yet, but I don't really want to get checked like every few hours because I feel like it's such a mental game. And I remember at one point I hadn't progressed much from one cervical check to the next, and that really brought me down during labor. I was like really frustrated because I wanted to be progressing and I was feeling the contractions and feeling the pain, and that got in my head versus just like trusting my body and trusting that the labor process was progressing, because it was progressing very quickly. Whereas the cervical checks kind of made me feel like it wasn't really into my head. So this time around, I would like to get as little cervical checks as possible and just trust my body and trust the process and how I'm feeling, and let it kind of happen naturally on its own timing versus like rushing myself or feeling like I'm being rushed or anything like that. Something that we are doing the same when it comes to our hospital experience is for our first birth. It was just Kevin and I in the hospital because of COVID. We really didn't have the option of having any visitors or anyone else in the room when he was born. And I actually really loved that experience. Like, I loved that it was just Kevin and I. I think it worked out really well. And it just kind of eliminated the whole like, you might be comfortable with this family member, but not that family member. And it just made it simple to just have Kevin and I and not have to explain that to anyone. And so that's what we're doing this time around. We're just having Kevin and I in the room, and I'm really excited for that because I just love that we were able to share that together, and that there wasn't like, there's already so many voices in the hospital room between like the nurses, the doctor, everyone's like rushing around when it comes time to delivery. So I feel like just having Kevin and I and not having like even more voices and like even more people in your face, and just having that time to just really bond with the baby afterwards, without having to like share that. I know it sounds kind of selfish, but I was recovering. I feel like I was trying to figure out breastfeeding, and so that was like a whole thing. So I honestly cannot imagine if we had guests come in. I think that it would have made my breastfeeding experience way harder, bonding with us and the baby way harder. So we really want to keep it just the two of us. The next thing that I want to do differently is actually something postpartum, and that is not feeling guilty for giving my baby a bottle. That was really, really hard for me. I was also super scared of messing up anything when it came to breastfeeding, since that was something that I had worked really, really hard to get to a point that I was comfortable with. I was just so scared of anything affecting our breastfeeding journey, and then also just feeling like guilty, like I should be the one feeding him all the time. I don't want to put that kind of pressure on myself this time around. I don't want to feel guilty for giving a bottle and letting somebody else feed the baby if that is what we need, especially with having two under two. I know that it's going to be so different, and I'm going to have my hands full all the time, and I'm just going to need to give attention to my toddler as well. And so that might look like sharing some of that responsibility of allowing someone else to feed my baby. So I'm mentally preparing for that because I know it's easier said than done. I also noticed that when I did start having my husband give my firstborn a bottle, which was way later, like even like around the 12-month mark, for my first, that their bond grew so much. So I just want to give him and other people the opportunity to have that bond with the baby as well, and give a bottle if I decide to give a bottle at any point without feeling guilty for it. Even though we want it to be just Kevin and I in the hospital, when it comes to postpartum and being home, I definitely want to embrace visitors a lot more this time around. I think I was super hesitant having a pandemic baby with who to allow to come and visit us, and so we were really strict and kind of like isolated ourselves postpartum when it came to Jaden's birth. Whereas this time around, I know that I mentally need to have people there for me and allow people to be there for me. So I definitely want to have a lot more visitors once we get home, and once we get the breastfeeding journey going, and once we're in that like comfortable recovery zone. I want to be able to just allow people in, and maybe even if it's just like having them over and having them give us company versus like taking the baby or anything like that. I just know that I mentally need to have people around and have that support around, and not to feel isolated, because I am very quick to get cabin fever if I'm like home alone or stuck inside all day. So making sure that we allow others in, and then even if like getting out some too, like I think I want to be quicker with going out. With Jaden, we hardly went anywhere until he was like at least 3 months old, at least. But this time I feel like even if it's just like a walk around the block or to the park or to I don't know, the beach, anywhere, I feel like it's really important for my mental health postpartum to be around other people and to get out more often than I did with our firstborn. One thing that I want to do the same this time around is not really letting people speak into our breastfeeding journey. It was really, really hard for me at the beginning with Jaden, especially when I was in the hospital. There was just a lot of pressure, a lot of different opinions, and even though everyone meant well, it can easily become overwhelming. And I think the more stressed you are, the harder it makes your breastfeeding journey. So I really had to like tune everyone out and just kind of do what I thought was best for me and my baby. At one point, like the nurses were telling me to give him formula or to give him a bottle when we were in the hospital, and I remember just being in tears because I didn't want to do that. And I'm so thankful looking back that I didn't, that I just kept trying and was able to get a good latch and talk to the lactation specialist there. I definitely want to see a lactation specialist again this time around. That's something that I definitely want to do the same, because I think that made such a big difference, a positive difference in our breastfeeding journey. Just figuring out what worked for the baby and I, and not worrying so much about like him being weighed every few hours. Did he eat? How long did he eat? All that stuff, but just doing what felt natural, having a lactation specialist, and kind of figuring out the journey between the baby and I. So that is all the things that I've had in my mind for things that I'm doing differently for baby number 2. If there's anything that you did differently between baby 1 and baby 2, let me know. Or if you have any good tips or tricks for having 2 under 2, let me know, as well, as we are preparing for the start of a new journey at the next chapter of our journey. If this video was helpful or if you liked it, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.